Sneakers and Cleats, the podcast.
Welcome back to the Sneakers and Cleats podcast. We're recording this on Wednesday. Usually I would say it's Thursday, February 29th, leap day, but today is February 28th. We are recording this on a Wednesday to be released tomorrow. Matt Roy, Don Harris, Chuck McGinnick on board as always. Gentlemen, how are you today?
Great. I am confused now that you said leap year. I always forget. Why?
Every 4 years?
February? I don't know. Why did that happen, though?
I don't know. Are you of the belief that if you're born on February 29th, you can only celebrate your birthday every 6 years? Or
Yeah,
4 years? 4 years?
Yes, I want to know why they
fair.
did it again.
I don't know.
Why does it matter?
I don't know. Julian calendars.
Does it have something to do with farming?
I don't think so.
How did I not look this up? Because I knew you were going to ask this. I just didn't. I didn't look it up. I should have
Let's
looked it up
leap
before.
ahead.
We're leaping ahead. This is episode 80. We've made it to 80 episodes. We got through all of
Wow.
the.
We haven't been canceled yet?
We got through all the offensive line
Wait till
numbers,
today.
which is
Yes.
nice. Wait till the end of the show when Don cancels himself. No, just kidding. We are on number 80, and to me, as we always start with what the number of the episode reminds you of, what athlete, what event that begins with 80 or has something to do with 80, it's Jerry Rice.
It is Jerry Rice.
Jerry Rice is the GOAT. It's the 80 that everyone should think of. It's the 80 that I think of. He's a three-time Super Bowl champ. He's Super Bowl MVP. He played 20 seasons. He owned, at the time of his retirement, he owned 38 NFL records just by himself, including most receiving yards, receptions, touchdowns, most 1,000-yard seasons. He's a top 5 football player of all time.
I think he's number
one.
1.
He's probably not 5. I don't know. I think Lawrence Taylor's the best football player of all time. But it's between those two.
I think Jerry Rice is the greatest football player of all time. And if you
so
look
good.
at like touchdown records, the crazy part is that like he's number 1, and then the next 9 of the top 10 are running backs. Like it's not even like so weird. He's such an anomaly.
His numbers are just so far and away beyond everybody. Like the longevity of Jerry Rice's career outdid every person that's ever played in the NFL except for
Mississippi.
I know this too. Is it Mississippi?
He's from Mississippi, right?
Mississippi Valley State.
I looked at. They just got their first win the other day. Good for them in basketball. They were 0-27 to start the year, and they finally got a win the other day. But see, I know things like that, while you guys know exactly where he went to school and whatnot. But yeah, Jerry Rice, I would say top 3 with him, Tom Brady, LT probably.
Okay.
As the top players of all time. Who's next on the touchdown list? Is it Emmett?
I don't know.
I think Emmett. Well, Emmett has the most for running backs. I know that. So I think it's Emmett. Then I think it's.
You guys and your lists.
I'm good at records. I think it's Emmett, and then it's Marcus Allen. No, it's LT. It's Emmett, then LT, then Marcus Allen. So
Don't know much about
just all-time
history.
touchdowns. Other 80s.
Singing on the show.
Other notable 80s. I still want you to do another poetry slam.
All right, we'll have to come up with one fairly soon.
Yeah, next year when we do the high school hype.
I have no problem with your list of 80s. They're all great Hall of Fame receivers, but you omitted, I just go back to the Cowboys, Tony Thrill Hill.
I saw it, but I didn't put it on.
Yeah, he was great.
I got Chris Carter on here, another Hall of Famer. Steve Largent, James Lofton, Isaac Bruce, all Hall of Famers. Andre Johnson of Texans lore, probably the best player besides J.J. Watt in Texans.
New Hall of Famer?
In the Texans' short history. And then Rod Smith, one of my favorite players of all time. One of the best undrafted players of all time, Rod Smith, the wide receiver for the Denver Broncos, won a couple of Super Bowls there. In 1980, I like doing these as well. Steelers beat the Rams. Terry Bradshaw was the MVP, 31-19.
Who was the quarterback of the Rams in that Super Bowl?
Of the Ravens?
Of the Rams.
1980.
Give me the initials.
VF.
Vince Ferragamo.
That's correct.
Thank you.
You could have given me 1,000 years. I would have never gotten that right.
It's like, and what number did he wear? 15? Sorry, I just hammered you guys for your list.
Come on.
Here I got,
Phillies defeated the
I
Royals.
think it was 15.
Phillies defeated the Royals in their first World Series in franchise history, for World Series win in franchise history for the Phillies. Lakers defeated the 76ers to win the NBA title. That was Magic's rookie year. That was the infamous jump center year for Magic. As
Kareem was out of Game 6 with an ankle sprain back at home in L.A.
Because of course he was.
And then Magic jumped center. They ended up winning the series.
That?
Huh?
How the hell do you remember that?
Even I knew that.
Did you? Okay.
Here's another one.
You're
for
the one
you.
asking Vince Ferragamo's number here. That's way more famous than Vince Ferragamo's number.
Here's another one for you on that one. That game was not on live television.
No, it's tape delay.
Tape delay.
By an hour and a half, right?
Yeah, and it was probably the last one.
When did things really start going live? Was it right after that?
It was probably the last one. Magic changed the league. Magic and Larry. I think the 81 finals was live.
The other thing I think about when it comes to the number 80, and it's not a jersey number, it's 1980. I think of the Miracle on Ice.
Sure.
I mean, we just had the anniversary a couple of days ago of Miracle on Ice and Al Michaels' famous call, and it was like, how do you not think of that when you think of 1980 or you think of 80 as in general?
Over time, it's interesting. Al Michaels' voice texture has changed so much, right?
Yeah.
One of my favorite things is I'm a broadcast nerd. And so one of my favorite things is when something like this comes up, it's the anniversary of X. You get to listen to all the famous calls, and then they pull out the Vince Scully tapes, and they bring out the Bob Costases and the Al Michaels and the Pat Summeralls and the
Vern Lundquist.
Thank you. That's the one that was slipping my mind. But I love that because then you just get to listen to like minutes and minutes of great calls, and it's fantastic. The Jack Buck calls, and then it brings us to the Romo call this last Super Bowl. Don't bring it back up. Pull the tape. Look at this right here.
When Gibson hits his home run in the World Series,
so good.
I went back and watched. I just wanted to see what Scully did as opposed to Romo and Nance. Not Nance's fault, by the way. Nance might have let it go. But when it's gone, when Scully finishes his last two words, 90 seconds goes by before he says another word.
It was like a minute, something like that, minute 18, something like that. It was awesome.
I just still can't believe it goes through Buckner in real time.
Yeah.
That was just genius.
All right, let's stop being nerds for half a second.
Yeah, okay.
And then since we're going up to the Valero here pretty soon, Lee Trevino won that year, 1980. Lee Trevino, a great golfer of all time. So
Texas legend.
Legend.
Struck by lightning twice playing golf.
What are the odds?
And you know what he said when people asked?
Do the math.
He was struck by lightning twice playing golf. When they asked Lee what he would suggest to make sure that people did not get struck by lightning playing golf, what would his advice be? He said, grab a 1-iron, put it over your head, and walk right down the middle of the fairway because even God can't hit a 1-iron.
That's a really good one. All right, let's get to some substance here. Stephen Jones talking yesterday. We got a lot of Cowboys coverage for you today. We talked a lot of Spurs on Monday. We're going to talk a lot of Cowboys today. Stephen Jones talking. This would have been on Tuesday since this is now being released on a Thursday. Stephen Jones asked a lot about Dak Prescott and not giving a lot of answers. He said that they're not going to expound upon the details of his contract, CD or Micah. Wouldn't really say anything. He did say, though, what's on his mind is making Dak not just the past and the present, but the future of the Dallas Cowboys. And that brings to question, like, is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? You know what I mean? Like,
no, I think it's a good thing. I think, though, we always go back to the earlier point, which is I think we all like Dak as a quarterback in terms of what he does for the team, what he means in the locker room, how good a quarterback he is, where he is in comparison to other quarterbacks in the league. It's just this price tag is what's so hard to get around, right?
Yeah.
It's if you're trying to build a team and you have a finite number of dollars, it's just crazy that the quarterbacks are making half the money, basically.
Yeah, and I think what the Joneses are saying is they're kind of talking out of both sides of their mouth. Do they want Dak to be the long-term quarterback of the team? Absolutely. Do they want to sign Dak to an extension? Absolutely. What they're not saying is what they may or may not do based on that dollar figure and based on the dollar figure of both Micah and CD. Who's their best player?
Micah Parsons.
You think?
Yeah, I'm going to go Micah Parsons.
Yeah,
Over CD Lamb?
Micah's their best player.
Well, it's a tough call based on, I just saw somebody was crunching numbers the other day about where the Cowboys receivers are in the league, and it was, obviously CD's got a very high rating in comparison to the other receivers in the league. But their other guys were like 98, 99, 107 out of 120 guys ranked. So, he was their best offensive player last year in terms of not being the quarterback.
Also,
maybe Pollard was the guy that was the toughest guy to stop.
I'll say this: out of the three of those guys, Dak, CD, and Micah, I think CD's the easiest to replace because it's harder to get a really good quarterback or top 10 fringe quarterback, and it's hard to find pass rushing. So I think if you look at it that way, CD is probably the easiest to replace. We have so many different.
Was that a whisper F-bomb?
That was not an F-bomb. Nope, that didn't happen. We have so many.
He pinned it behind his teeth.
Go back to the tape. Let's go back and look at the review.
We have so many freaking receivers. So many freaking receivers in the draft. Every single year, you have receivers that are being traded. Every single year, Jay Jettas is now talking about being traded out of Minnesota. Like, wide receivers are easier to find.
Okay. I'll buy that argument, but I'll also say I can make the argument that CD's their best player. I kind of go with you guys on this Micah. Micah, though, kind of faded down the stretch this year, and CD kind of had a breakout year. Either way, the Cowboys are not going to, let those two guys get off the hook because of what they have to pay Dak. And so I think what they're going to tell Dak's people is, all three of you, do we want to win a Super Bowl and play together? Because if you all three hold the line of what your value is on the open market, we're not going to be able to keep all three of you guys. And that's going to be an interesting thing. Do they then do that weird thing where they have 2 voidable years and don't extend him this year? Or do they, I think that's what they're dealing with 3 agents, 3 big money guys, 3 egos, which who knows what direction that goes in after Dak's performance against Green Bay and CD's family saying Dak's not the guy. I mean, who knows all the dynamics that are going on there?
Yeah, I mean, something that the Joneses have always been really good at is capology. I mean, they're always try and fit people in as best they can. But at this point, they basically, a couple of years ago, gave Dak a contract that bent them over a barrel. Like, he's got them dead to rights when it comes to what he wants. He has all the leverage. They can't trade him without him being approved. He has a near $60 million cap hit this year. They can't franchise tag him in 2025. Like, he has them dead to rights. Whatever he wants is what they're going to give him, or they're just going to play him on the $60 million and let him go next year. Or
the 2 voidable years option.
Yeah, to lower the cap hit. But what I'm saying is, if he doesn't want the 2 voidable years, they can't add it to it without him accepting it.
I don't know if that's true.
I don't think
that's true.
But
I think that's option C that everybody's talking about is what they might be leaning towards, where they add the 2 voidable years, which will give them cap relief in the short term, but he's an unrestricted free agent at the end of the year.
Got it. Either way, he has them dead to rights as far as getting a new contract. And so it's like, do you want to give? I saw something floated out here this year or today that was like 3 years, $180 million. Is that digestible for the Cowboys to give him $60 million a year for another 3 years?
I don't know. It just feels like all 3 of these deals all hinge on Dak, right? CD's going to get paid. Mike is going to get paid at some point, but maybe they can wait a year before they have to really have to be forced to deal with that situation. But it sure seems like these 3 are all joined at the hip one way or the other. And I would love to be a fly on the wall during these conversations because I think Dak he's got to realize at this point, look, you've already made your money. Now it's these guys' turn to make the money. Wouldn't it be something if Dak somehow took a little bit more of a sweetheart deal in order to get these guys back, not only on the fold, but also think about what that would do in the locker room.
But if you're Dak, though, don't you, you banged this drum for 4 years. They were ripping him off for a long time because he was playing for so long under his rookie deal and then 2 franchise tags.
Right.
That if you're Dak and you're Dak's agent, it's like, whoa. You still owe us for what we gave you.
I'm sure that probably went into why he got paid when his rookie deal was up, right? But at this point, look, man, you've got the endorsements, you've got all this other stuff. What is going to make your team better?
Did you know?
And again, even if Dak takes a little bit more of a sweetheart deal and you get all these guys in, it's still not going to explain what we saw in that Green Bay playoff game.
And
right?
that's the thing too, because like Dak finished second in MVP voting. So from that point, his agent has a lot to argue for, right? Like this guy is the second best player in the NFL. He deserves Mahomes, Josh Allen, Burrow money. But on the other hand, we all know he's the 7th, 8th best quarterback in the NFL. Like if you want him on your team with the playoffs on the line. And so there's two realities there. But, you know, it's just like baseball arbitration. You go by the numbers, he's going to get paid.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot there, but I can't imagine them letting him go at this point, like ever. Like it's harder to find a quarterback than it is to find any other position in the NFL, and I'll take the 10th best quarterback in the NFL as opposed to gambling on a Bryce Young or a Will Levis or whoever. Insert other mediocre quarterback.
Trey Lance.
Trey Lance. I mean,
the way that you just presented that is the way that 95% of the NFL is operating right now.
There's two schools of thought. It's, do you sign him to this long-term extension and thus putting Micah Parsons, CeeDee Lamb, your other young guys, maybe even Mozzie Smith when he is eligible for an extension and all that stuff, you are basically putting other talent on the chopping block by giving so much of your cap to this one player, or do you want to go the 49ers route where you draft young,
or the Cowboys route while Dak was working under the rookie contract?
Exactly, or the Russell Wilson route in 2012 when the Seahawks got all that talent and they were able to sign all their talent because their quarterback wasn't making 25% of their cap. It's just, which route do you want to go?
Look at Baker Mayfield in Tampa.
Well, Baker's about to
what he signed for $1 million though.
Yeah, I mean it was incentive laden, but yeah.
I mean Derek Carr compared to him, and you know what if you sign Dak to a new extension and give him all the money that he wants, but without a no trade clause?
Let me ask you this,
so that you could move him in the future because some sucker is going to take a Dak Prescott. Somebody's going to take him.
Let me ask you this: who would you rather over the long term, Dak or let's go with Baker Mayfield?
Dak.
Yeah, I would take Dak too, but again,
Dak means losing talent. You have to take that into consideration, right?
100%. But I mean, I think that's kind of the fascinating thing. Would be interesting to see if you just let him play out his contract, right? And then if you guys do what you think he's capable of doing, then you have a good problem to deal with next year, which is you're going to pay him $1 gazillion opposed to a $500 million. So
did you guys think that there was a little bit of contempt or frustration in Stephen Jones's voice when he was talking about Dak? Because he was like, we have the way we think of this, and then I know Dak's team has the way they think of it. Did you think there was a little bit of like in his voice there?
Yeah, because Jerry's given the same answers, and that is, we can't pay everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys want to win or not? Because if everybody takes a little less, we can get this done. But if you're going to hold us hostage for exactly what you think you're worth on the open market, all three of you, we can't get it done. And if we end up letting CeeDee Lamb go, I mean, what is Dak without CeeDee Lamb? Like, right? I mean, if you're Dak Prescott and you can't see the value of Micah Parsons at CeeDee Lamb, because here's the other thing. If you go somewhere else, you know, I think Jerry's selling point is look at Troy, look at Romo. There's something to be said for the star on your helmet and what that means long term. You know, these guys are making $20 million a year doing television.
Yeah, but here's the thing. They drafted 23, I think, 24, something like that. They can get a receiver there. I mean, I know that we look at like the Titans who traded away A.J. Brown and then drafted Treylon Burks, and he wasn't A.J. Brown. But CeeDee Lamb is replaceable. We proved that receivers are replaceable when they traded Amari Cooper and then replaced him with, guess who? CeeDee Lamb. You didn't sign Des Bryant and replaced him with who? Amari Cooper. Like, receivers are replaceable. You can always trade for one. You can always find one in free agency. You can always find receivers.
So then the question is, you can't get a Patrick Mahomes or a Joe Burrow or a Josh Allen, but you might be able to get a Dak Prescott. I mean, it depends on your value of Dak.
How much better is Dak Prescott than Kirk Cousins?
Not a lot.
Not a lot. And
I started
Kurt's a free
rethinking your
agent.
question about Baker. I would take Dak to be the quarterback of my team. But if I'm in the NFC Championship game and got to go 85 yards with 2:30 on the clock and only one timeout,
Give me Baker.
I might take Baker.
Give me Baker 100%.
Yeah, guys, I'm not going there. I mean, I'm sitting here thinking about the Kirk Cousins, good quarterback, but yeah, I'd much rather have Dak.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's not a
Why?
fair fight. Well, you just said it. I mean, he was second in MVP. It's a pretty big league. I mean, they won a lot of games this year. They won a lot of games last year. They won a lot of games the year before. He's won a lot of ball games in this league.
Yeah.
I can lose in the playoffs with someone a lot cheaper.
You can.
That's the thing.
And so we go
that's
all
valid.
the way in this giant circle to come back to we all like Dak, but at what price?
Yeah.
Yep.
And another couple things. I'm going to skip one. I'm going to skip 4 here and go to 5. So the running back free agency market is going to be intense this year. One of the things that Stephen Jones said yesterday was that with Tony Pollard, it's a business thing. Like if the business is right or if the money is right, the more we sign him, basically. But business is business. Basically said Tony Pollard's out is what I heard.
He's
when
a free
he said
agent.
That. He's a free agent. So when you look at the free agency market for running backs this year, they're not going to tag Tony Pollard like they did last year. There are a litany, a who's who of running backs over the last 5 years. If you play fantasy football, the people in free agency this year are exactly who you have had on your team for the last 5 years. Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, Austin Eckler, Josh Jacobs, Tony Pollard, DeAndre Swift, A.J. Dillon, Zach Moss, J.K. Dobbins, Devin Singletary, all of them going to be free agents this year, probably. None of them getting the free agency, the tag. So if you're looking at this list, first and foremost, do you like them not signing Tony Pollard to an extension?
Yes.
And 2, which of these running backs would you want on this team the way it's currently
Cheapest
constructed?
one.
The cheapest one.
Yeah, I think I'm with Don. So that's why I don't think Tony Pollard's completely off the table. I mean, given the list that you have before us, I think they would like to have Tony Pollard back, but probably for half the price, or maybe even less than half of what he made last year.
I think of that whole list, Tony Pollard cost himself the most money last year. He played horribly.
Well, he was a 1,000-yard rusher, for whatever that means now. But to be fair, he was better the last few weeks of the season. And I think, from the 40,000-foot view, they feel like, now that he's been more than a year removed from his injury, maybe there's still something there because he was showing signs of running a little better towards the end of the year and more powerfully. So I don't know that the Tony Pollard story has been completely written in Dallas yet, but again, it's gonna come down to economics.
And I think there's a position where you can get the 4th rounder from Louisiana Tech, who might just be as valuable, as important, as effective. I think the draft is where you get running backs because you don't have to pay them money.
Not this year. Like this year is a pretty bad running back class as opposed to the last few when you had Bijan and all those top end guys and even Isaiah Pacheco back there in the 4th round. But when you look at this, so many of these backs can help do exactly what Mike McCarthy wants to do.
They need a banger. They need somebody bigger, I think, than Pollard.
I think that's
the
the plan for the Cowboys. They want to get a banger too to have
I
somebody.
love Derrick Henry.
Derrick
But
Henry's the guy.
his
right?
price tag's going to be too high.
No, I don't think so. He's 30 years old. You're only going to get so much money. If they sign Derrick Henry to a 2-year, $22 million deal, what's wrong with that?
I love Derrick Henry. You don't have to even. I just can.
Yeah, I don't think they want to pay that kind of money though per year. That's a lot of money to tie up at the running back position. I think they want to get cheaper at that position. And I think, it goes back to Zeke, right? If Zeke would have taken a sweetheart deal and taken a lot less, then Zeke would probably still be a Dallas Cowboy. But he went into free agency. It didn't work out for him based on how the league values these running backs at this stage of their career. And I think if Tony Pollard and his agent go to the Cowboys and say, we'll work for half of what we did last year, then Tony Pollard will be a Cowboy. If he doesn't, then he won't.
Let me give you a name check. What about A.J. Dillon? A.J. Dillon, and
sure.
you're very familiar with him as a Packers fan.
Yep.
A.J. Dillon is a banger. He's just not the level of Derrick Henry. He's not a pass catching back. He's a run zone read, or he's a zone inside zone guy that is going to run straight up your butt.
Yep.
So why not A.J. Dillon, pair him with someone who can catch the ball out of the backfield, maybe a Tony Pollard, to get two backs for the price of one?
If the price is right.
I mean, it's just...
I think you're right. I think that's the way they're thinking. They want to get 2 for 1.
I think everybody is going to look at the market and say Derrick Henry, Saquon, Austin Eckler, Josh Jacobs, Tony Pollard, DeAndre Swift, and be like, sign Saquon Barkley. Like right now, he's 27
Somebody
years
will.
old. Somebody's going to, but all the Cowboys fans in the world are going to look at Saquon Barkley and be like, sign him.
Jerry's eyes will get real big too, and Steven will talk him off the ledge.
Yeah, let's call a spade, though. Saquon Barkley's lost a step because of all of the injuries he's had and because he has been the bell cow for the Giants for so long. So I wouldn't personally want Saquon. I would want someone closer to an Austin Eckler or something like that.
Yeah, you might have to get somebody that's on a rebound, but again, these talent evaluators nowadays, they know if these guys still got a little gas left in the tank. So
Can you imagine the windfall or the chaos that would happen in Cowboys country, Cowboys nation, if Derrick Henry was a Dallas Cowboy?
sign me up for
What
that.
number would he wear?
Can he be 22?
Number 1.
Oh,
Oh, he can't be 22. You're right.
he can't be 22.
You're right. I don't know what was he. He was a single digit in college.
I'll bet you Emmitt
was
Smith
6 in
would
college.
take the number down from the wall.
I think he would allow Derrick Henry, King Henry, to do that. You want to know the most wild Derrick Henry stat I've seen ever? Is that in his career, he has more passing touchdowns in his NFL career than he does receiving touchdowns.
No kidding.
Swear to God.
He's thrown more.
He's thrown more touchdowns than caught touchdowns.
If you want to see the most incredible Derrick Henry stat, go look at his high school rushing totals.
It's just running over little kids.
I got
in high school.
one quick Derrick Henry story. Cade and I when Cade was a little kid, we went to Lambeau Field. We were sitting in the back of the end zone, kind of behind the crossbar, so it wasn't great seats. And it was the Titans-Packers preseason, and we just looked at the sidelines. It's like, who is that guy standing with all those grown men that's 20 times bigger than the rest of his team? It was Derrick
And he's a
Henry.
running back, not the defensive ends.
One of my favorite pictures of all time is when Derrick Henry comes out for the coin toss. I think it's the national championship game a handful of years back, and Mark Ingram's there with him. And he makes Mark Ingram look like a small Kevin Hart-sized man. And then Mark Ingram's not a small dude. He's like 5'10", 220, but but Derrick Henry just makes him, just dwarfs him.
I think I've told you this before, Matt, and Chuck knows the story. Ken Hall, who the Army All-American Bowl MVP trophy is named after, is a Texas legend, the Sugarland Express, played at Sugarland, Texas in the 50s. He put the bar so high on the national rushing records in 1953 that no one ever came close, not for whatever this, 70 years, whatever it is. And I watched because Ken was a friend. He ran a barbecue joint in Fredericksburg. We did a number of stories on him. And every 4 or 5 years, some kid would be flirting with his high school records. But like he ran for 600 yards in a game in high school on 11 carries.
Jesus.
Okay, so these
Pretty good
were
ratio.
ridiculous numbers, right? And then Derrick Henry comes along out of Yulee, Florida. And I don't know if he was playing like Class 2A ball or not against really smaller kids. But Derrick Henry was the guy who finally broke Ken Hall's record for all-time career, over almost 12,000 yards. Now, do the math on that year by year. And then he goes to Alabama, wins the Heisman Trophy, and then he goes to the pros and does what he does. So I've made this argument from a high school, college, and pro standpoint, he might be considered the greatest running back of all time. Now, Emmett and Walter Payton in the pros, for sure, Barry Sanders. He's not on their level in the pros, but when you take all three into consideration, nobody's quite done what Derrick Henry's done.
Derrick Henry's phenomenal. I mean, and to think that he came out, I'm trying to look at when he was drafted. He was the 45th pick in the second round when he came out as the Heisman Trophy winner. People thought he was too big. People thought he couldn't move laterally.
Right.
Yeah, look what happened. But, all right, 2 other things I want to get to before we get out of here. So, Mike McCarthy is missing the combine this year. Something I wanted to talk about on Monday, but we talked about the Spurs a little too long, which I enjoyed. I think it's a big deal. I know that coaches miss it more regularly now than they used to. But you heard all week from people, head coaches and talent evaluators, that the point of going to the combine is to get these kids face to face, to see how they process things, to see how they answer questions. It's not really about the 40. Like, you saw them play. You have all the tape. It's not really about the 3-cone or how good a quarterback can throw.
A lot of guys are going to get paid based on 40 times.
Well,
Surprised.
Yeah, but I mean, they shouldn't. And most of those people that happens to, the John Rosses of the world, the Kevin Whites of the world, they end up not panning out in the NFL when you run a really fast 40. But the thing that a lot of the talent evaluators say is we will need to get these guys in the room. Those meetings are the most important part of the combine. Also, being able to talk trades or talk free agency with other GMs, other coaches. Mike McCarthy isn't getting any of that. Mike Zimmer isn't getting any of that, even though Stephen Jones said yesterday that they'll put him on a Zoom call or they'll put him on the phone or whatever. You're not getting that real experience. And I think as someone who needs to hit in this draft and as someone who's ass is on the line very clearly this year, Mike McCarthy should have gone to the combine.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I mean, maybe something's there. I mean, it is odd that he's not there, considering that he has been there. So I don't know what to make of it, but I guess it's a little odd.
I think I read where 16 head coaches aren't going this year, and that's going to become more and more the trend. And I think what it says is that Jerry and Steven defer to Will McClay to make the call on who these players, on who gets drafted, more so than McCarthy. I think they'll get his opinion, but I also think McCarthy will defer. If in the draft room, if it's between 3 guys at a certain pick in the 3rd round, I think at the end of the day they go, I like this guy, I like this guy, I like this guy. And then I think at the end of the day, McClay has the stamp to suggest to Jerry, and then Jerry makes the final call. But I think it's McClay who makes that call. And I think at this point, Zimmer and McCarthy might be more constructive working their butts off in the office this week than being up there wasting a lot of time having dinners and sitting around in this watching fat guys run 40s.
I think that also says something about how much they respect Mike McCarthy's talent evaluation opinion, though. Like, if you're coming down to Stephen Jones, Jerry Jones, and Will McClay, and then your head coach gives the opinion and you end up going with the talent evaluator, the head coach is the one that's playing these guys on the field. He's the one that's actually has to mold these guys into the young men and the great players that everyone hopes they'll be. So if you're discounting his opinion in that respect, then that's an even worse sign.
I don't know, because these guys, I mean, it's like Pop. I mean, Pop doesn't have a whole lot of say anymore, doesn't want it, because these guys, they have a team of guys that are watching every EuroLeague game, every college game, 9 guys on staff crunching all kinds of numbers, going to these practices, talking to these coaches. The coach is too busy coaching his team. Pop's too busy coaching the Spurs. McCarthy's too busy coaching the Cowboys week in, week out. While that's all going on and we're worried about week 10 regular season against the Commanders, Will McClay and his staff are going to 6 college football games and talking behind the scenes to high school coaches and college coaches about every guy that they think they might have an eye on. And so they're way more prepared to know about who to take than the head coach of the team.
Well, no disrespect, but drafting in the NBA is a lot different than drafting in the NFL.
Yeah, it's true.
You have two rounds, and anyone with eyes could have seen that Wemby was going to be the first round pick. Anyone with eyes could have seen that they were going to take Tim Duncan back in the day. You know, it's like those things are a little bit easier.
Well, for sure, and it's not apples to apples, but that's why it's even more important to have, you know, Gil Brandt was the master of it, picking guys, you know, Sonoma State and all this stuff. You have to have all of these guys evaluating everywhere all the time, 365, a full staff of scouts. Mike McCarthy does, quite honestly, and this is not a knock on him, he doesn't know.
I mean,
the staff, the player development guys, it's their job to know.
It's fair to rely on your scouts. Obviously, Mike McCarthy can't go to every high school football game and every college football game and all of these all of these other events that he should go to or that he is relying on his scouts to go to, but not being at the combine where everyone's in one place. You have 245 kids that are running around, many of which you can meet with. You can get face-to-faces on. If you have 30 that you really, really like, you can actually introduce yourself to the kid. I know that there's 50 one-on-one meetings, and that's really what they rely on now to get those people in the building. But it's just having those conversations seems like something of more of a big deal to me. But,
Okay.
Last thing, Zimmer and his identity. Stephen Jones talked a little bit yesterday about Mike Zimmer and the identity he's going to bring to the defense. He talked a lot about toughness. He talked a lot about needing bigger, more physical linebackers. Chuck, you mentioned this last week, I think, that the linebacking core is something that needs the most work on that defense. What did you think of Steven's comments yesterday when it talked about Zimmer's toughness, his nasty that he's bringing?
He's basically echoing, again, I go back to what Jerry said at the end of the year, right? You want to run the ball better, we want to stop the run, and we want to be more physical. So with those three axioms being in place this offseason, I think you're going to see the moves that the Cowboys make to try to get better in that regard.
Yeah, they're going to be bigger at linebacker, bigger at running back.
I mean, he was talking like Marquise Bell. He mentioned Marquise Bell a few times, name a few times yesterday, and he was like, "We love Marquise, but he's a safety." Like you had to move him in. They kept playing that 3 safety, 2 linebacker shell last year, and it's like that's why you guys got run on so much.
Yeah.
So if you're gonna play a 4-3, I don't know what kind of system Zimmer comes in with, but if either it's a 4-3 or a 3-4, you're going to have more backers on the field. You're going to have more size. And if you have more size, you're going to be better at stopping the run, and that's really what they need.
I think the key with Zimmer is going to be fun to watch, to see how he translates after being 2 years out to this modern-day player who's so coddled and so, like, don't scream at me. My feelings will get hurt.
Do you think – so Steven also –
he's –
Yeah, I don't know that there's that – I don't think they have to really worry about that in the NFL. I mean, I think there's still a place for a guy that's got a firmer hand, that's a little more fiery. I mean, it's such a physical game that there can't be any of that.
Yeah.
You know, so much, or there'd be less of that, I should say.
Steven also said that they're going to see where Micah ends up because he got played a lot on the edge last year, but they might play him off the ball more in Zimmer's system, so that'll be interesting to see how he fits into an off-ball linebacker role because that's mainly what he played over at Penn State. It's almost like moving him back to where he came from. So
I'd let him play wherever he wants.
Yep.
I think that's what
Micah, you want to play quarterback? Look like he can throw it a little bit too.
Don, I think that's what Dan Quinn did, and look where that ended up.
Well, he put him on the edge a lot. I put him middle linebacker and let him run sideline to sideline.
Well, you know that Leighton Vander Esch will get hurt at some point.
Leighton Vander Esch is going to retire.
I think you might. Sadly, unfortunately, him and Sean Lee had the careers that were basically the same.
Yeah, because I don't know that, you know, again, we could talk about how good the Cowboys were on defense last year, top 5, but losing him, your quarterback essentially, the guy that was taking the plays and making the calls and all that, I don't know that Leighton Vander Esch gets enough credit for being a damn fine football player the last 2 years, for sure.
Last thing on the way out, Don, you have 30 seconds. You want to talk Caitlin Clark and Pete Maravich?
I love Caitlin Clark. I think she's fantastic. I look forward to watching her games in March Madness more than I do the men's games. And I can't wait for her to become the leading scorer in the history of college basketball. Those are all facts. But she is not breaking Pete Maravich's record because the records are in different record books for a reason. It's apples and oranges, different ball size, different rules, different quarters versus halves, different histories, all those kind of things. It is not discounting her and at all to say that she's not breaking Pete Maravich's record. Pete Maravich's record, done in 3 years, in 83 games instead of 128, averaging 44 points a game, will never be broken by anyone in college basketball. She's going to have the most points, and Pete Maravich is going to be the greatest scorer of all time.
So it's fair to say that she's the highest scoring college basketball player of all time.
She is going to have more points scored as an individual than anyone in the history of college basketball.
But that doesn't make her the best scorer.
That is correct. Pete Maravich is the greatest scorer of all time. He averaged 44 points a game, only played 3 years. If you want to make it equal, why don't you count Lynette Woodard's records, who, by the way, is still the highest scorer in the history of women's college basketball. She scored more points than Clark has right now from 1979 to 1981 at Kansas, But her records are not recognized by the NCAA because at the time, the records were kept by the AIW, which is a different league than the NCAA. So they don't recognize Kansas in 1981 can't get recognized. So because of that, just like you couldn't compare Dr. J's scoring average in the ABA to Kareem's in the NBA. It's two different things. So I love Caitlin Clark. I'm not misogynistic, sexist, chauvinist. I just am saying she's not breaking Pete Maravich's record.
I just had to let you loose on that for a second. Okay. Also, shout out to Scott Van Pelt for doing the Lynette Woodard piece that he did the other day.
I didn't see it.
Yeah, look up Scott Van. Actually, look up Stanford Steve on Twitter, and you'll see they did a couple of minutes.
Stanford Steve. Is it like any relation to Scuba Steve?
No. He's
they paid tribute to Woodard because she's been lost in all this.
Yes, they did, and KU retweeted it and was like, "Thank you."
Yeah, she was a globetrotter too.
Yeah, no, Lynette Woodard was amazing. I actually didn't really know of her until Scott Van Pelt brought it to the forefront. So thank you to him.
And I think it's great that she has shined the light on Maravich, so that we can tell people. Yeah, we can tell people like you who missed Pete, missed Pistol Pete, the exploits of what he did. And by the way, as a freshman on the freshman team, he scored 741 points. So he's over 4,000 if you were to count his freshman numbers, which you can't, understandably so. But 44 points a game, that'll never be touched.
All right, that's all we got for you on this edition of the Sneakers Cleats podcast. We went a little longer than anticipated, but when we're talking about the Cowboys and when you have a great number like 80 that we had today. So remember to download, rate, review, subscribe, give us a 5-star rating. Tell a friend, tell an enemy. Hope everyone listens to this on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We will be back here on Monday to talk more Cowboys and Combine probably. So until then, everyone have a good weekend.